do allow for questions following the service. Who has the first question?
Two questions. One, was Herod a Jew? And the second question, how did he come into power? Was he appointed by the Roman Empire, or how was he? How did he become king?
How does this guy do this? Yeah. During the in a short way here, during the time between Malachi and Matthew, if you will, the Greek Empire came into existence and clashed with the Israelite Commonwealth, if you will. The Greek Antiochus Epiphanes, you've probably heard of him, who was a Syrian. He was really Syrian, but he was appointed by the Greeks. Of course, offended the Israelite priesthood, if you will, by attempting to sacrifice a pig in the Holy of Holies. The apocryphal book of Maccabees talk about the Maccabean revolt, if you will. And the Maccabeans was just a priestly family that rose up in revolt. It's one of those stories that is almost hard to believe. Had no army, no nothing, but they decided they would resist. And he gathered up an army around them, of course, and they ultimately ran out of Antiochus Epiphanes. What happened there in the meantime was, it's like, this is really good. This is almost like a restoration of the monarchy. But then what happened in the meantime, the Romans got power, and they began to be powerful. And what happened was the Maccabean dynasty, if you will, became weakened through simony. They began to sell the priestly office. It was worth an awful lot of money. In fact, Edersheim even talks about in Old Jerusalem the palace of the priest. Basically, the high priest lived in a palace. It was worth money. And they began to buy and sell the priestly office. Well, when you're buying and selling the priestly office, you're in no position to challenge the Romans. You have your moral authorities. It's just gone. So when the Romans become powerful, they wanted somebody, and the Romans were like this. They often didn't come. I mean, they fought wars and they won them. They often didn't come and say, okay, now you're going to have a Roman emperor here and a Roman governor. They didn't do that. They looked around and said, we'll take someone who's kind of from here, and if you'll do what we tell you to do, we'll put you in power. And there was a man, he wasn't Jewish. He was an ancestor of Herod, called Antipater. And I don't know if, I haven't done enough study on his name, but Antipater kind of sounds like against the Father. I don't know enough, but that was his name, Antipater. It seems to mean that, against God. He was a compromising man who knew how to gain power and knew how to keep it. And he was constantly shifting alliances, and he always seemed to pick the winner. He was just good at that kind of stuff. And he began to gain power. And as those guys gained power, and they learned from each other, if you will, and they just knew how to ingratiate themselves with Rome. And that's the key right there. They knew how to ingratiate themselves with Rome and therefore maintain power. Herod was so good at that. For example, even when he was killing his own kids, he would always ask the Caesar if he was allowed to kill his kid. And the Caesar would, yeah, gotta take care of it. That's kind of way. So he knew how to he wanted to be the man, but even he knew, those Herods knew how to, shall we say, prostrate themselves before the people who were bigger. So Antipater is the guy that came on board, appointed by the Romans, after the Maccabean dynasty, if you will, sort of fell apart through corruption. And it was really corrupt. I mean, it was, we think of corruption as like, wow, somebody got thrown out because of some kind of indiscretion. It wasn't like that. They were buying and selling offices, and in one case, a high priest was killed because somebody else wanted his job. So the Romans just kind of like, I mean, at least the Greeks had to sort of fight for the Israelite Commonwealth. Sort of fell over, played dead for the Romans. They had nothing left. But I think he asked another question too. Is that,
Well, he was Jewish? I mean,
he was not Jewish.
he was not Jewish.
He was not Jewish. He was part of, he had officially embraced Judaism, but in terms of his, shall we say, his Abrahamic roots, definitely. And to address that too, it's always hard to talk about what's Jewish and what's not. Since the word Jew means, it means an ethnic identity and also means a religious identity. And I don't know any other term like that. I really don't. You can say Arab, but that's an ethnic identity. You can be an Arab Christian. You can say Muslim. That's not an ethnic identity. That's a religious identity, or if you will. The word Jew can mean both, and confuses a lot of people. Yes.
I don't know what my question is, but I need you to address it anyway. I've certainly heard all that teaching that you talked about, that, you know, they were expecting this earthly king, not a spiritual king. There's something really missing in all of it. I mean, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker, for a long time. So, is it really that the world missed that he's also the earthly king, and not so much that they missed the spiritual king?
Those people that say he was just a spiritual
Right.
king, do miss it. They miss something that Herod didn't miss.
I think it was.
Herod got it.
Yeah.
Hey, see, here's the thing. We hear people say, I've heard this, John 18:36. You've all heard it, right? Jesus is a king here. You know why? Because my kingdom is not of this world, right? My kingdom is not of this world. But he goes on to say, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I wouldn't be delivered to the Jews, but then my kingdom is not from here. You see, when he said, my kingdom is not of this world, he didn't mean that he wasn't king over this world. He meant that he didn't get his authority from this world like Pilate did. Or like the Herods did, prostrating themselves before the people to gain their power. That Christ wasn't like that. But to say that Christ is not a king in every sense of the word, is to miss the point. And frankly, miss the point that Herod got. And frankly, a point that Mao and Stalin and everybody else gets. They get it. They get it that people believe the Bible, that they worship Jesus Christ, and he can't have it. By the way, Herod, you know how long he died after he killed the innocents? 2 years. 2 years and he was dead himself. He could have left him live and would never have been threatened. But you can be sure that thought never entered his mind. He was threatened by this king, and he should have been. He was right to be threatened by him. You know, the Roman Empire itself was threatened by the Christians for years afterwards because they worshipped this king. So I think what you're saying is, you've heard that he was a spiritual king and not a king in any other sense. Not true. Not true. Because when he ascends, remember he ascends, and then John sees him, right, in Revelation, he's ascended, and he introduces himself as the ruler of the kings of the earth. And we're not just talking spiritual there. He's the ruler of every king. Psalm 2.
I was really struck by your comment. If Christ had not come, then there would be no humanity left. And I'm thinking about this, if I can breach the subject. The New World Order, they're going to try to make one world government and then a one world religion too. So that means Christ is out of that. So what's going to happen? I mean, it seems to me like they're going to self-destruct.
There's no other choice for them. They're coming up against that stone. They're coming against Daniel's stone that struck the image and grew to fill the whole earth. If that stone, as a small stone, strikes the image and destroys it, What's going to happen to all the other kingdoms that come against that stone as it's growing? It's going to be worse for them. They have no shot. They can destroy a lot in the meantime, like Herod, the destroyer. They can do a lot of wicked things. They will not be successful. They will be destroyed. They will be the dustbin of history. They have no chance. Just like, in a sense, like Babylon had no chance. I mean, you know, Daniel predicted the destruction of Babylon. Babylon had a wall around it the size of a beltway around D.C., 66 miles. Can you imagine a wall that big? It was wide enough for 2 chariots to pass each other. Came up against God and his providence. And that was the end of Babylon. That was the end of it. You know, it's odd. Babylon, we have a hard time even finding it today. Figuring out exactly where it was. Come up against God. Have no shot. No chance. Yes.
This reminded me, and then I went into the house of God and I understood their end.
Sure, from, I think is that Psalm 72? Or 78? Sure. Little perspective. They seem big and bad. Half true. Or bad. Well, I thank you for your kind attention here this morning.